Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence. Thanks for joining me, and if you're new to the show, welcome. And if you're not new to the show, welcome. Unraveling Midlife is loosely based on astrological midlife, relating to Western astrology transits that run from the mid-30s to the mid-40s for everyone. Each of these four main midlife transits have an overall theme, though details do vary by generation and of course by individual, and episode 9 covers a lot of that. So really I'm here talking to you, whoever you are, because I'm in my astrological midlife and I'm unraveling it. The name of the podcast comes from an article written by Brene Brown, The Midlife Unraveling, and it really touched me, and I was very grateful to the friend who shared it with me. And that was around the beginning of my astrological midlife, which I was finding a little challenging, that particular Pluto square. And here we are with the podcast, and so far most episodes have been interviewing someone I find really interesting. It's my podcast, so I can do that. I choose people I think are cool, I'd like to talk to, and a lot of other people have feedback that they're enjoying them too. But I'm mixing up the show a little bit these days, and I mean, this is actually still an interview, but it's an interview of me. So I featured recently on the Radical Awareness podcast, hosted by John and Nicole Allen, and you'll hear about how we know each other a little bit later. It was quite interesting reflecting on the content of what you're about to hear, because it really focused quite a lot on when I lived in Auckland and that Auckland-based yoga and Kirtan chapter of my life, which was before astrological midlife and I moved out of the city, etc. I'm pretty sure, and just a note on a glossary, I'm pretty sure the majority of the people who land on this podcast and actually press play will have heard of yoga. And though Kirtan is getting better known, I'll define it for you anyway. It's another Sanskrit word, Kirtan. It's spelt Kirtan, and various people do pronounce it differently. And it means joyful chanting. Really, to me, it's singing mantra. There's another term for the glossary, mantra. You probably know that word. And it's the music aspect of yoga is Kirtan. It's generally done in a call and response fashion, so someone leads and sings a line and then everyone sings back. So it can be quite simple, it may be a little bit more complex, but it's accessible to anyone. Even if you think you can't sing, you can still practice Kirtan, and of course there'll be reflections around how you feel about your voice, whether you've got a great voice or you think it's not so great. You may have issues around that you need to deal with, and you may just have a lovely, blissful experience during and after, because that's what many people report who keep practicing Kirtan. If I were to introduce myself like I have the other guests that I've had, Kirtan would definitely feature, but so do a lot of other modalities these days, such as Dream Yoga and the Dalian method, which are both quite alive for me right now. And I wanted to let you know I'll be leading a Delving into Dreams online 3-part course in June. It uses reflection, writing, basically, on symbology, finding your own symbology for dream symbols, and we'll also use an embodied breath method, and it's a bit physical as well, to delve into what your waking or sleeping dream is telling you, and kind of getting that connection with your intuition, finding out what your next steps are. And Yashodhara Ashram's Dream Yoga method is the reflection part, and the Dalian method is the embodied method that I mentioned. It's the best tool that I've found to gain inner clarity when I can't get it easily myself, and that does really help in the dream space. The course is 3 Monday nights, New Zealand time, starting the 13th of June 2022. and you can use the discount code DREAMS. Kind of helps if you put it in all caps lock, capital letters, DREAMS, and you'll get 25% off. So here we go, on to the interview, and a very happy new moon in Gemini to you.
All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Radical Awareness podcast. We have a very special guest on the show today.
Someone we've known a long time.
Yes. The beautiful, wonderful Sarah Spence, who's here today to chat to us about her awareness journey. Sarah also has a podcast. It's Unraveling Midlife. So she has been delving into those conversations a lot also recently, but we know her through our yoga connection, and she has been with us for the purpose of teaching people about Kirtan and leading Kirtan and all of the wonderful things that come with the realm of Bhakti Yoga.
She has a very beautiful voice and holds a very magical space. If you haven't done Kirtan with Sarah, I highly recommend it. It's very, very, very special. So we're really grateful we've had those experiences in person with you, Sarah, because it's always very special.
And you're trained in singing as well, is that right?
Yeah, I studied classical voice kind of part-time through like high school, university, and then in my 20s.
Really adds to the experience.
It does.
But we'll start, as we pretty much always do, with the question about you. And can you tell us about your journey to awareness, your journey to greater awareness?
I found the phrasing quite interesting, the journey to awareness, because where is awareness? Where is it a destination? And I personally don't think so. And it's an ever-evolving beast sometimes, roller coaster, a nice slide down the playground sometimes, because that's life. It is up and down, and yeah, my podcast Unraveling Midlife, just the title kind of, it's life is unraveling. The journey to awareness is kind of, I guess, unraveling ourselves, unraveling myself, gaining more awareness about life and emotion and other things that kind of come through, and creating more observation of that rather than identification with it. Doesn't mean I feel like I'm any good at it, even though I sound quite confident. I'm like, the witness part of me is going, wow, you sound like you know what you're talking about. Because I woke today and I was like, I feel really melancholy today. What's the point of my life again? You know, like that's the kind of stuff that happens and we don't necessarily talk about. And I know that that I have a tendency to want to go, oh, but everything's okay. So I guess that is part of my journey to awareness, is starting to become aware of that and being able to move through it towards more self-acceptance. And I believe that that's what midlife is about. Probably should add in there that the midlife that I'm talking about, unraveling, is related to astrological midlife. So whereas especially as you get older, you kind of definition of midlife kind of pushes out, and I did have someone say, is your podcast about menopause? And I'm like, no. No, my podcast is not about menopause. I mean, occasionally it comes up because I do like to interview wise women who have been through midlife themselves. So occasionally it comes up, but really astrological midlife is those 4 transits of the planets coming into interaction to where they were in your birth chart. So it happens for everyone from the mid-30s to mid-40s. It might start at 35 for someone and 37 or 38 for someone else. It might finish at, I don't know, 43 or 45. I'm in the middle of these 4 transits. I'm 43, but my kind of biggie isn't actually until next year, so mine goes out a little bit later than some other people's, and it just depends because some planets move faster than others at different times. It's quite fascinating, but that's my astrological geek coming out. Yeah, the journey to awareness, I guess, for spirituality and awareness started for me when I read the Celestine prophecy when I was 16.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people started off in that, if they found that in the, ever since the mid-90s when it came out. And then once I went to university, finished university, I ended up working over in Canada as a hiking guide with Japanese tourists. But I found a yoga ashram over there, and that's where my journey with chanting continued. I was also studying classical voice, and I found chanting at this ashram, and we chanted every night in the Temple of Divine Light, which is in Yashodhara Ashram in Western Canada. And I didn't know what we were chanting. There was all this Sanskrit. What does this mean? Though we did chant in English as well. Well, it's more like singing. It just felt to me like singing. And there was something about that. And then I went to live in Ottawa to do some work. And I lived in a place run by a teacher from the ashram. And I used to wake up to her chanting every morning. It was quite magical. And that's when I got involved with Kirtan, but we called that bhajan, and it wasn't until I'd lived overseas in other places, looked at a few other ashrams, and come back to New Zealand. I'd lived in the ashram in Canada for a year before I came back, and I was in we called it the elastic band, playing in the temple with the bhajans. And when I came back to New Zealand and got involved with a kind of a cousin tradition here, that was Kirtan as we know it in Auckland, with kind of simple call and response, and really getting into that kind of speeding up and less kind of churchy sweet, which was what we used to sing at the ashram in Canada. So with that yoga background and starting to have that awareness, and music brought so much reflection, because by then at university, I'd started teaching myself guitar because I did a music paper, which was the best. I studied IT and Japanese, so the music paper was really cool. And then writing music, so songwriting as well as playing the kirtan, and then getting involved with other groups doing kirtan. There was one in Hamilton that they're still there, and I actually did some chanting with those guys the last couple of weekends. Just singing just makes me happy. And so the added bonus of the layer of Sanskrit, these really sacred sounds that have had scientific experiments to show effects on sand, for example, is some research that's been done, really is hugely uplifting. And Swami Shivananda of Rishikesh, who was kind of the grandfather of the couple of traditions I've been involved in, always said that Sankirtan, singing kirtan, is the fastest way to enlightenment. Especially in India, where there historically were a lot of people who didn't necessarily read or write. They do have I'm kind of rekindling a passion at the moment for doing the more wordy Sanskrit chants, because they have a different effect, and there's a certain point where they click in and I go, oh, it's like when you're doing a yoga class. I find about 20 minutes my nervous system goes, oh yeah.
So true.
I accept.
Yeah, and I'm finding that again with the chanting, so that's been really cool. So the journey to awareness through the kind of yoga, living in the ashram in Canada. I went to India, didn't live extended time in India. I wasn't that keen on getting sick. I did spend some time in a couple of ashrams in Australia as well. And then moved off from yoga towards flower essences, the medicine woman of School of Shamanic and Esoteric Studies, where I still do some courses, so more the Western, as well as having immersed earlier in the Eastern. Got into astrology, started learning that. That kind of came off into Unraveling Midlife, the podcast. And at the same time, I've been really getting into an amazing healing methodology called the Dalian method, which is a self-healing method that you can actually work on yourself to kind of shake out the core beliefs that have kind of impacted in different areas of the body, but also impact emotional, mental as well. And worked with the creator and learning the facilitation of that as well. So
as in shake out, as in like actually using your body to shake, like sort of trauma release.
That is part of it.
Yeah.
That is definitely a part of it. It is. It's very embodied. It's not a talking therapy. It's not an energy work. It's transforming, and she can actually see the thought forms in people's
Yeah.
bodies. So she created a method from her background in more active meditations and through the chakra system, through breathing, through expressing, to kind of slough off those layers. And honestly, like, people have had incredible results, both physically. For me, it's been more kind of like mental, emotional. I had really bad PMS and I've always struggled with it. And I went to her. Yeah, I know, talking, it's not menopause, but there's a PMS.
Yeah.
But there got to a point where I had this awareness, and I'm like, this isn't me. What is going on? It's not me. It feels like something's just invading me for a week every month. And I was like, I've had it. I'm willing to try anything. And a friend I'd worked with in Canada had mentioned the Dalian method a while ago, years ago, and I was like, oh yeah, here's another thing. But then I was actually ready to go, okay, I'm ready to try it now. And she told me her experience and her mother, whose cancer results, like her recovery from having a blood transfusion as part of that, was incredible. So, okay, I'm ready to try it. And I tried it. And she said, okay, here's your homework. There's always homework. Got to integrate into your life. And she said, in 4 months' time, it should have lifted. And I was like, okay, 4 months. Wow, I'm not used to that. Used to going to a session with someone and they go, oh yeah, there you go. But then you feel a bit better and nothing really kind of changes.
So true.
And I found, until I had that experience of at 3 months going, nothing's really changed. And at 4 months, oh my God, it's gone. And I've never had it come back.
Well,
I still get PMS, but it's like I get a bit grumpy. Like, it's like normal PMS.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And did you used to have
Yeah.
a lot of physical pain? Is that what we're
No,
talking? Or was it
that
more just
wasn't.
like
Mine was a mental, emotional thing.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's just so interesting to hear you say those
Really
words
is,
because in my own journey of this, I've always said, this is not me. I feel like I'm being, it's just bizarre to hear that, you know, the connection of what that is and talking about kind of the thought forms around it and the sort of collective pain that we're all carrying. And it does, I feel like as it's coming, it's like something else is coming through me and then I have to experience this, horrendous pain and everything each month. So really interesting to hear that and the correlations for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's a group experience when someone in the house is in pain, right? It really affects more than just the human who's in pain. It's debilitating for the whole. So it's such a gift to be able to take awareness to that and kind of transform it.
It's interesting the way, like, it is a huge part of our awareness journeys is the kind of, it's the discomfort, right? It's the pain that we've experienced and then we go and do those things and try them and then it opens up our perception in our world again, which then opens up our awareness again. And it's kind of like fascinating how we label things. And I know for my own journey of pain and the discomfort of it all and all the directions it takes you and the amount of times it's like, this will be the thing that makes it go away or changes it. And it's like, I get so hopeful. And then there's like a shift and then you're looking for all of the subtle movements and changes, but in the same way as it might still come back, but then there's a whole different version of reality because the awareness has changed again. And we like to refer to it being like a spiral, you know, we're always going around a spiral and the spiral is going up and changing, but your perception on all of the things you were kind of given to experience sort of changes. So it's all really very interesting.
I've always thought of that as a spiral for sure. Like, you get the same issue and you're like, oh, here it is again, but I do see it slightly differently.
Yeah. I am a little bit
Something's
wiser.
happening. And we're eternally optimistic, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So as you are now, you know, in your life, when it comes to kind of or awareness or whatever we call it, you know, being more spiritual or awake or awakened, whatever it is, what do you find are like your tools and practices? Obviously, we've spoken about singing, and I think that sound, singing, vibration, chanting, and we can look at that idea of somatics is so powerful. But do you kind of have things that you do daily, or is it more like you sort of tailor your tools? Tailor, thank you, your tools to when you need them, you know, depending on, like you say, you woke up this morning and things aren't feeling so good and that kind of feeling of, oh my gosh, what's the purpose of my life, which I also very much relate to.
I
What's your
think
process?
well, I
You know?
think there's a theme right now with the state of current events that's
Yes,
kind of across the
agree.
board
Yeah.
for everyone in a slightly different way from a slightly different angle. But yeah, I would love to just sit here and say, well, ever since I started my daily practice of two sun salutations and then got into mantra, that I've been so good, and I've sat down every single morning and done. I mean, there was I remember being on the plane back from India and I was doing a daily mantra practice and I was trying not to fall asleep so I could finish my mantra practice with my mala sitting on Singapore Airlines. And then I beat myself up about the fact that I fell asleep and I didn't finish it. But I think the reality is that life is life, and at the moment, I have a daily practice. Yay! But there's been a long
Yay!
time where I've felt like it wasn't really a daily practice, but it kind of was, but maybe it wasn't. And then if I did but 3 times a week I did like an hour and a half something, that kind of, the mind is a tricky thing. So at the moment, yes, but does that mean it will be every day for the rest of my life? I somehow doubt it. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's just actually when you first started talking about the awareness journey and getting into spirituality and things, I guess I got jaded at a point, and I felt like, there was the first flush of, whoa, oh, this is incredible. And then life keeps going and life keeps going. And then I see these people that come to conscious festivals, for example, and they're brand new and they're so excited about this,
amazing,
that,
isn't
and the other. And they're like, oh, tell me about blah, 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 blah. And I go, well, I've been coming for 15 years. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people come and go. I've seen these festivals start up. I've taught Kirtan to someone who's started one of these festivals. It's a different, very different perspective to the people that are coming in like all fresh. And I remember back, I don't know how many years ago, maybe it's about 12 years ago, someone in a similar position to me saying, finding it so hard to do my daily practice and I haven't done it for ages, and thinking, oh my God, she doesn't do her daily practice. I can't ever imagine that happening to me.
That's so beautiful,
I mean, let's be real. Life is life, and I'd love to be one of those people who could just go, oh yeah, I when I stress out, I go and practice. I'm still working on that. Sometimes yes, but other times, I'll be right into that packet of chocolate biscuits, so
And I'd love to meet the person who really does every time go to the practice. I think it is just such a whole lot of spiritual bypassing, and that it's like this kind of shiny, all I ever do is my practice. I never lean into anything else because I'm in it's like the superior complex.
Superiority complex. You said it right the first time.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the spiritual world, of like, well, we're better because we've done these things, as opposed to it is just life, right? Like we're all kind of navigating, and I just loved hearing you talk about it, because I remember I was exactly the same. Came in, I'm like daily practice, and this is my diet, and these are my things, and the same thing. You meet these other people who are kind of like, oh yeah, and you're like, well, you obviously haven't found the right practice, And now it's hilarious. It's like, even in like the recent weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm practicing like yoga asana like maybe once a week. I can't even believe I'm saying it, And I was like,
that's more often than me.
Yeah, right.
And I taught regularly for like 6 years.
That's only because John's teaching a class that I attend, and this moment of, you had these stages, right, of reflection of, but why was I doing it initially? And I'm like, no, there was a point that I started, and you had this amazing euphoric experience, and then it's kind of like it becomes complacent, or you're doing it because you've made yourself do it, and then it's lost the sacredness of everything, and then we start to exactly judge and project onto others. And when you're teaching yoga, like I said, or running trainings, there's this expectation, and then it sort of falls away, and so then you're in your own guilt spiral, right? Because everyone projects it onto you what you're doing, and you're like, yeah. Yep, I'm meditating all the time. I'm not at all. And And then just even in the last like week, I was like, oh no, I do want to practice asana each morning, even just for half an hour. Like I actually think I'm a better person. And then, starting it again in a different way. But it is like that spiral. And I think the greatest thing about it is the humility. To me, you have so much humility, and we've seen you at many festivals and things, and you always have so much humility, so much grace. It's never felt, this kind of
holier than
egoic,
thou.
I've been doing all these things. You don't have to have it all signposted all over you. And it's kind of one of the most beautiful qualities about you is that you are just in your life and human and exploring. And the word I think is unraveling, right? Like unraveling what's there, but with this natural grace of like, I'm not anything different to anybody else. These are my experiences and this is what I'm working with. So I think it's a really valuable conversation for a lot of people to hear and to understand, because even if you've just been in it for a few years, this is when you start putting that pressure. And then there's a grief cycle. Did you notice that first sort of wave of grief? Can you talk to that at all?
And what were the things that you grieved? Like was it the experience afterwards? Was it the fact that you weren't in the same routine? Was it
You weren't the person you thought you were going to be?
I think what springs to mind was, while you were talking before, is that people putting others on a pedestal. And I remember the first time I put a teacher on a pedestal and it didn't meet my expectations. And I was going through a rough time. I was after the GFC. I'd been to India. There just wasn't any work. Like really good workers were all on the dole. Like it was 2009. And I was teaching a few yoga classes, thank goodness, or I might have become an alcoholic. That had crossed my mind. So I wasn't seeing things particularly clearly, but I did recognize that that I'd put someone on a pedestal and that person was human. And then later on, I realized that I could see some other people putting me on a pedestal. So I've always I've always used humor and maybe not being as holier than thou in a lot of situations, because since then I don't want people to kind of have unrealistic expectations. I mean, quite possibly that happens anyway. But everyone's got their own journey with that. So, yeah, I think there was a point where I stopped teaching yoga so much, and a lot of my friends were people that used to be yoga teachers. And then the switch in the last few years since I moved out of Auckland, and I would have had to have been very, very focused to start to teach. It's never been my full-time thing or I love it, but I did quite enjoy the few years where I covered for my friend once a month. That worked really well for me.
Yeah.
And then I moved out of Auckland and I barely taught, and now I've realized I don't even identify as a yoga teacher anymore, and it was such a big part of my identity. So I think identity really comes into it, who we identify as. And for a long time it was Kirtan. I was in a music group, Shakti Sacred Music. That was about 6 years, and that was just before Kirtan started to like boom in Auckland. So now a lot of the people that practice Kirtan have no idea, never heard of Shakti, don't know who me and the other people who were in there. Like it's, we've kind of faded into the amazing history of especially female Kirtanists in Auckland, of who there are an amazing. I interviewed Joshna Latrobe on my podcast, and she's been singing Kirtan in Auckland since the 80s.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah, and who is that?
and the last one to come out was with Karen Hunter. Like, people know her as a musician, but she also did quite a bit of chanting at that Ashtanga, the Auckland Yoga Academy, the Ashtanga place in town, probably just before I came back from overseas. So we've all kind of there's been lots. We should do a documentary on.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
really should, because it has been a little bit derailed, let's say, and definitely has a different vibe, which, I'll park here. A lot of people who are listening know my feelings on this, and
It
we
de-
can discuss it.
yeah, so the last month or so, I've been going and playing kirtan with Kailash, who runs Srinivasa Yoga House in Hamilton, and it's tiny. Like he it's his house. He opens it up for classes. He's spent a lot of time in India, and he comes from this incredible musical family. Like his brother was a professional cellist, and he's got a sister that was a professional singer. They were all, well, his niece who was in Shakti with me.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
but we love playing music together. He's an excellent drummer. He's got a great voice. We're just singing together with him. We both really, really enjoy it. And it's such a small little thing, but it's quite different. I think because of the Indian tradition, like I mean, sure, we still sound Western. Like we try our best with Sanskrit pronunciation, but that can be quite tricky.
Mm.
I mean, he's lived in India for a while. I've try my best with the like if there's an N with a dot underneath and a thing, an N with a thing on top, and like the same, like there's four different types of S's,
Yep.
um,
All
all of
those tongue
that,
positions.
all those tongue positions. Where I did a course once and went, wow, I don't even feel like I can try and say or chant Sanskrit anymore because I know that I'm mucking it up. And then I kind of see someone doing something live on Facebook and they're having a great time and introducing heaps of people to chanting, and that's fabulous. And I just go, oh, it just sounds a bit rock for me. Like
Mm.
why is it different? It just doesn't have that same kind of Indian-y kind of quality. And it's not that I'm hardcore want to like kind of like that bit in the middle where it's a little bit Western, a little bit Indian. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just a feeling.
I mean,
Yeah, it just
and it
matches
is,
some people and it doesn't for others. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
It is hard. I mean, there's this real sacred aspect to it. I know for myself or us in our experience of partaking, because we would never lead, we're really not singers. It is such an inward journey, right? And so much Kirtan, there is a very much connected community vibe to it, but it's very internal. Like for me, I really don't want to interact with anybody else if I'm at Kirtan, but I want to be around people. But it's such an inward experience and such a heart. I mean, it's so bhakti. It's such a heart-centered experience of just. I don't think there's anything else that has exploded my heart as much as chanting in that way with others. But with in some circles it seems more about what everyone is doing, and it seems a little bit more external, and it kind of feels like what you're talking about is the difference between how can we be together and still be here, and then how are we together, but it's about being out here and look at what I'm doing and where I'm at. And I guess that also just is a reflection of where different people are on their journeys, of that as we come into this kind of spiritual world. It is still external. It is still based on external validation, because that's the world we're unraveling from. That is the conditioning that we've existed in of like, no, but my validation is out here. And even though as we're seeking and we're sort of curious about these other practices, we're still trying to get it out here. And then over time, you're like, oh, I think it's all in here, right? Like this is the magic. This is where I want to be. And so maybe it is. I have thought about some of the kirtan scenes that exist currently and some of the yoga movements that exist in New Zealand and Auckland as the bridge, right, of coming out of that kind of external world into the more internal experience where you realize that it's just here and it's actually the path of humility. But to look at some of the ways it's presented right now, it seems the complete opposite to humility. And without actually, it's not necessarily judging or saying it's bad, it's just like an intermediate step towards coming home to here, like that level of awareness. That's what it feels like to me, and kind of what I feel like I'm hearing from you.
And it seems like historically that is the role of the festival. That seems like what happened at Woodstock, if we could call that the kind of the birthplace of this movement connecting yoga to the festival vibe. That was what it was all about, this bridge into spirituality for these people who come to see rock music, especially in the case of Woodstock, and then they get a sermon from a swami. They get this little bit of a peek into the spiritual world, and they go, hey, maybe I can walk in that direction. Maybe it is acceptable for me to be a white person in this world and start walking in that direction. And The unfortunate addition from this perspective of social media and seeing everything via imagery and photography is that there's a real effort to portray it from a visual perspective so often, because people are staging photographs, people are promoting themselves with photographs, and then everyone arrives thinking they need to portray themselves as this image, and then are constantly checking on their image, and then maybe get image and presentation of image obsessed. It seems to be, that's something that I personally notice, particularly attached to the festival scene.
Thoughts and feelings, Sarah?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, seeing that I don't necessarily come from that. Like, I've never been that great on doing the social media and getting the photos. I often find, after 15 years of being involved in conscious festivals, there was kind of like a high point where I seemed to feature in quite a few photos, and then maybe I wasn't friends with the photographers after that, and it's kind of lucky if I kind of like see myself in the corner. Um, I was having a conversation with this the other day with a few people. It just happened to coincide with probably around that time where I hit about the 35 mark and I stopped being featured in the photos. I mean, I might just be
I
no,
love this
it was,
correlation. I think it's very valid.
well, it might have been a little later than that, but I did kind of find that interesting now looking back, especially with the whole unraveling midlife and midlife astrological transits. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, and exploring that youth worship culture that we have as well. And I've noticed that in the conscious festival scene, it has become a lot younger. When I got into the conscious festivals, I was, I don't know, 27, and I was really, really young for the scene that was there at Prana festivals at the time. Um, in terms of of Kirtan, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a feeling. You're attracted to something or you're not. I do find that there's some that is that's really popular right now. That's very, very, these basics. Almost sounds like Christian rock, but in Sanskrit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that. And it's not to say that it's not respectful and inward and heart. It's just not. It just doesn't gel on some point. I also do find the groups that seem to have dogma attached aren't my cup of tea either. Like, if I prefer to have an all comers kirtan where anyone can contribute what they want. But there are some people go, no, you have to do these specific mantra, and it just feels a bit fundamentalist for what I like, and they're more than welcome to do what they will, but it's not really my scene.
We like that. We have this phrase we use a lot in our teacher trainings. It's one of our principles. It's called inclusion to empowerment. And that if you start from this place of inclusion, you're much more likely to reach more people and lift more people up, rather than exclusion to disempowerment.
It's hard though, like with these types of practices and yoga and, the sort of dance and balance of honoring tradition and respecting tradition and lineage and understanding all of these things. And so it becomes quite a complex discussion or even understanding. And so it is about honoring just what feels right, like being able to trust our own, which is why awareness is so imperative and important, because you're filtering it through yourself. You're then like, well, I can just discern and I don't necessarily need to discredit anything else. I just know it's not for me. But I think for a lot of people, when you're first entering into the world, it's so confusing because it's like, well, what's traditional? And you kind of trust whatever you hear, and then the more you study, the more you understand. It's like, well, it's not as black and white as that. And the traditions and lineages of yoga, as all three of us know very well, is very complex. And so when I hear people who have been there for 2 years being like, well, this is the tradition, I'm like, okay, maybe, right? I hear you, and I know that your own low self-worth and journey is kind of leaning into the fact that you need tradition to feel okay with what you're doing. But actually, if you learn to stand here, you can take these parts and still offer it in an inclusive way. But that in itself, right, is so much learning and so much awareness to get there. And we all want to be like, no, but there's this tradition. It makes us feel safe. And secure to know. But yoga lineage is a curious one.
Can I tack something onto
I-
that before you go? Is can you also, and maybe they connect and maybe they don't, talk about the moment, the thing that happened that brought your teacher down off the pedestal for you? Like what was the thing?
Double barrel question.
What
Look,
was the thing that brought them down? And do those things relate? That maybe they don't, but
It's a
Um, that teacher who was also a friend, just in general, has an inability to say no and will talk around the point and around the point and around the point. And I think that's just specific to that person that just can't say no straight out. And yeah, it has driven me mad a few times in the interim, but I've just come to accept that's just that person and how they work. So, um, yeah. Maybe that wasn't so much of a teacher thing, but that I put my friend on a pedestal who happened to be my teacher. That
right,
may
yeah.
have been that. Other pedestals I feel that I've observed is I prefer female teachers. I've seen a lot of male yoga leaders fall off, and yeah, and be accused of a lot of abuse. So hashtag not all men, but I have always personally felt more comfortable with female teachers because there's not that kind of it's a man hormonal kind of difference
yeah.
between
I
man and
think
female.
the trap for the male, having taught young men yoga in our teacher trainings and watch this interesting thing happen, is that there's a real kind of take action masculine drive that sits in behind something that is so, it's such a narrow band of walking this line that's so easily derailed into ego, into very kind of the power of this new thing that they've learned that they want to share becomes this power that's so easily held over people. And then if you're not doing the self-awareness game on a regular basis and checking yourself and having people check you back, um, then you don't recognize it in yourself. And I think so often, I used to teach at another studio, and one of the students was talking to me about a teacher that we had trained who was a man, who she had been to his classes, and she kind of was talking about him in this, it's nice, like he thinks he knows what he's talking about and everybody knows that he doesn't because he's so new, but we all just let him get away with it and it's okay. And I think this is the issue, because that person wasn't going, you don't know what you're talking about. They were just letting him have his time.
I have observed, and not just me, I discussed this with other female yoga teachers, that there is an inherent bias in our society that men are, they're doing their best, but women, oh, well, they're not doing very well at all, and they might have done exactly the same thing. So we've
Agreed.
got this inherent bias in society where male, let's say yoga teachers, everyone goes, oh, they're so amazing. And so I go, okay, I'll go and check out this class. Oh, yeah, it's good, but there's, equally good, if not better, other yoga teachers that happen to be female. And I'm like, so why were people fawning over this male yoga teacher? And I can think of a couple of different examples.
Yeah.
Like, is it just because they were men, and as women, the women grow up going, well, men are better, and it's never said like that, but it's just inherent. And I know that we've come a long way from where we were before, but it's a process. We're journeying to awareness on this topic as a society, right? So yeah, I think that just in general, if you look at like even pop music, I don't know, I prefer female vocals. And yeah, there's some great female singers, but in general, the music people play around is often male vocals. Like, and I
True.
haven't done a scientific study. That's just my personal anecdotal observation.
I think another interesting thing on that is the teacher, the school teacher, the primary school teacher in particular. That so many of my friends who are male who have studied and to become primary school teacher, they're set, right? They're like, oh, you're a male teacher, you're guaranteed to get a job because there's just not very many of you, so you're like rarer. So all of a sudden you're better because you're male. So it's just the scarcity elevates someone to something more than what they are just because of the scarceness of it. Even if it's not really that scarce, there's just a perception of scarcity.
But you're so right. We just do not hold. I mean, I just want to speak into yoga. Like, it's
Yeah.
like we just do not hold the male teachers as accountable as the
Yeah.
females. It's, I mean, we've had many conversations with men where I'm like, you can either like get humble right now, or you're going to go off and become a dickhead. Like, that's, I have literally said those things.
Or
to
it'll happen
people.
in the other order. You're going to go off and become a dickhead, and then you might get humble.
I have
if
seen
someone
it.
humbles
There
you.
are teachers very well known, and I've said that to these people and then watched it happen, and you're just like, it's nearly like unavoidable if they're not choosing to hold themselves accountable. And the issue within the spiritual world is exactly what you're talking about, right? This kind of like, oh, it's so great you're here. Oh, it's a male. Oh, look, he's so sensitive because he's doing spiritual things. Oh, I love him. It's so nice. I'm like, cool. We're not doing that to females ever, you know?
Well, I mean, equally, you just look at general society, and when a man loses his wife, say to cancer, everyone's like, oh, let's make sure we invite him over for dinner and make sure he's got enough food. But when a woman loses her husband, it's not often to that same extent. People don't feel the need to mother a woman for losing her partner. And sorry, that was pretty like male female oriented. I'm still learning about getting more PC, but it does tend to happen like that.
It does. It really does.
Yeah.
It is interesting. And it is, I mean, it very much links to this topic, right, of awareness, because it's coming from kind of so many generations and so much of our collective past and even collective trauma around this, and the sort of the weird kind of imbalance of the pendulum doing this. And it's like awareness is what brings us into the center, right? To be able to have this sense of discernment and observation and just look at it and be like, actually, that doesn't sit right. Like, well, why am I doing this? Or why is that happening over there? And where do I stand? What are my values? And how do I choose to act? You know, like, can I, like that woman was like, but there could have been a different action. And a lot of times we've talked to these men and they want to be the best versions of themselves. But if no one ever says anything, they don't know. Like,
or the only thing they say is praise. Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's so amazing. Da, 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 da. And then, of course, it's going to go to the head. It's going to inflate the ego. It's going to deflate their desire to do more practice.
I have a theory,
love theory.
and it kind of does generalize as we've been talking about males, because we all know it's not all males, right? So, but there are types of people, the people who have a tendency to become the dickheads, get the big ego, look at me, and then there's the other side who are humble and maybe not stepping into their power enough. So when you are complimenting me on my humility, I'm like, but is that just because I'm not stepping into my power as much as I could? Because that's what I play with. Well, you know, there's that fear of stepping into like being a true power potential. So there's that kind of fine line of that balance of awareness that you're talking about. And either kind of going a little bit heavy on the kind of more egoic side, and or the other side, and they probably both stem from exactly the same kind of insecurities,
Yeah.
deep down that we brought up with.
100%. And such a good point, you know, like it totally is, when it's just like, I see people who are so confident in putting themselves out there, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I could do that. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll say to John, but I have all of these, you know, skills and abilities and exactly that thing, but I'm just kind of not doing it. And then, yeah, like how we justify it to ourselves and what it is. And it is a part of the spiral. Like, it's so hard. And maybe, yeah, you know, when you're like that, you have to lean more into the ego, and then there's all of this kind of cringe gripping factor because of what it represents at its most extreme. It is very,
Yeah, I can do it. I'll do it now and like be all loud, and then but I'm a bit scared. And how many years has updating my website been on the list of things? And I'll get some proper photos done, and then I get to I've got time to get proper photos done. Cool. Okay, make a plan. What do I wear? I don't really know. What do I want to convey? Oh, there's so much to think about with this kind of stuff. Like, like a lot of people, I imagine that many of your listeners are similar, where they run a kind of a small business and they're practitioners of some sort, but the advertising and the marketing, it gets like, oh my gosh, right? And so
and then
I
to take a
still
photo.
haven't had the photos taken because I put on weight, and then I didn't want to have the photos taken because I felt a bit fat, so I put it off again.
Wait till I go back down. Or it's like, we've done photos and then like the weight changes and I'm like, well, we need to do them again because I can't use the fat photo from before if now I'm skinnier than I was then, like
Maybe I should just get onto it and yeah, because I'm like, oh well, my hair's long at the moment, but my all my promo pics, my hair's kind of like chin length because that was a couple of years ago, and oh, it's more silver now. But do I really want to share that with the world? And that comes back to that like youth worship culture and the midlife unraveling. And I do want to slot in Unraveling Midlife. The podcast was named after Brene Brown's essay called The Midlife Unraveling. It is excellent.
Okay.
It is. I mean, she has a way with words, but
Really does.
it's to the midlife people what, I don't know, back when it was email before social media, the quarter life crisis email went around going, it's the quarter life crisis. And I think I got it at like 21 or 22. I'm like, yes, but I mean, I think life is a series of kind of what feels like crises until we gather that awareness to go, oh, it's just another crisis. Come along.
Yeah.
I'm on the crises part of the spiral. Cool.
I mean, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Yep.
Also, Jack Cornfield, a really good Buddhist teacher. He's got quite a cool podcast
Jack.
himself. Yeah.
Yeah.
The book that I got introduced to him by was called After the Ecstasy, The Laundry.
Isn't that the amount of moments you have on this path of just this euphoric, I'm amazing, I'm so centered, I'm so grounded and centered. And then the next day it's the complete opposite. And the amount of conversations we've had with people and students who are just so confused, they're like, but I did it all and now I've gone backwards. We're like, not backwards. This is it. They're like, but for how long? I remember someone being like, is this just going to go on forever? I was like, yes. I mean, I don't know, right? Like, I'm here still doing it. And they're like, no, but you're spiritual. And I was like, not really. The same person then once we were there with a group of people and I was really angry and actually just bitching about my neighbours. I was pretty raging, they'd called the council on us for consent on something, as you do, because we live in a world where we were renovating our house. And this just, I mean, we could have meditated every day, but that was stressful, right? Yeah. Like, and she said to me, she's like, I just feel really like I don't know how to deal with you now because I thought you were spiritual, but you were so angry the other day at your neighbours. So you can't be spiritual. And I was like, no. I was like, no, I'm not very spiritual. Like that's probably a better way to think of me, to bring it down, off that pedestal that you've created. It's like, I'm a very rage-filled person. In fact, that's generally why I do practices, so that I don't go around just murdering people, I'm like, I'm filled with rage. And that's this interesting thing, on that journey as well, of actually having to confront emotions. And emotions are so messy. It's not just this euphoric state of I'm in this blissful cloud of my lotus leaf. It's like anger, frustration, irritation.
8 stages of grief, and you go in this particular order, and it always works that way. And at the end of it, you're happy.
Yeah. Rage, frustration, sadness.
But people make a lot of money out of putting things in boxes and telling people how it is.
I mean, coming back to Brené Brown, she is the queen of the list. Like 6 things that blah blah blah, 7 things that, and she has a masterful way with words.
We love to read. We love lists. We love boxes. We can't wait to get out of boxes, but we love putting
Oh,
Love it.
ourselves and others in boxes. It's
love a
just
new
the
box.
human condition, right?
I mean,
Isn't it amazing? You go on, you're scrolling on Facebook and it's like 10 reasons why you're having a spiritual awakening, and you're like, oh yes, let me reason. Anything that used to start with 10 reasons, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll read it, Oh yes, that explains everything. I'm now happy. Like, oh,
I know it's
yeah.
not 10 reasons, but there was something that we were saying before. I know that we moved off the topic of kirtan and tradition versus modern, but what struck me was when I came back from overseas and I got involved with people here who were doing what felt like very, very traditional kind of Indian style, still Western kirtan. I would get out my guitar because everyone played the harmonium, and I'd get out the guitar and I'd start doing reggae beats, and then we'd like have a really good
oh,
time doing reggae
so
beats.
good.
And that was like breaking out of the shell. And then the kirtan scene changed, as we've discussed, and then suddenly everyone was doing they were doing the reggae beats and the rock things, and suddenly the Kawe Pura festivals went from having just kind of some very Indian style Anandamaga and a bit of Shakti sacred music, and that was pretty much, and the Shabda, the Hare Krishna band from downtown. There was like basically three, and then a few years later there's like 20 kirtan bands signing up to come and play, and a lot of it's guitars and bass and kind of like quite rocky. And then I'm suddenly like, no, like, where's the tradition? I have to do the traditional thing. I have to kind of counterbalance what's happening. And so then I became a little bit more traditional, and then I'm like, hang on, I kind of liked being the rebel. I'm not sure about this being the traditional.
I'm a traditional rebel. A rebel traditionalist?
Yeah. And so then I kind of stopped doing quite so much kirtan. So whereas you're encouraging listeners to come to my kirtan, I better actually start scheduling some.
Harass her is what we're trying to say.
Yes, I would totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah.
Because it is that thing, the scene changes and then you're sort of having to kind of sell something else. It's like, yes, I am traditional and I rebel in a different way to what they're doing over there. It's like a whole.
And I'm not a man.
You're not a man.
Not a
no.
man.
Yeah. It's fascinating, eh? I mean, yeah, I wouldn't.
And I'm in midlife, I'm a woman over 40. Like, what hope is there for me left,
You just have to wait.
So much, Sarah, so much.
Do you just have to wait till you cross 60 and then you can come in as an elder?
Yeah, quite possibly.
That's so true, though. It's like there's probably more
You have to wait till
acceptance
all
older.
the hair goes grey and then you can come back in in a whole new way.
Well, if I look at my mother, who's 71, she's still not all grey. So I might have to wait till 90 for that comeback.
Oh, okay, we'll
Do
see.
you
in
diet
50
grey?
years.
Is that a thing?
It is apparently. Actually, people
it's
quite like I've got a really nice Cruella de Vil streak
really?
just at my
Yeah.
temples, and some people go, "Wow, I really like that streak." I'm like, "Yeah, so do I." It's the other ones that are popping up all over the place that I'm really not that keen on.
Could you just stay in one place? This seems better. It has a youthful flair to it.
But then my friend, who's younger than me, and said, "Oh no, I've been getting greys," and she had popped out a few beautiful little boys recently. She said, hair mascara, you've got to do hair mascara. And you know what? It makes it stay down. So anyone who needed that tip, hair mascara.
Never heard of it. That's
Is it,
amazing.
You probably don't need it
different
yet.
product, or you just put
I have,
mascara in your
I
hair?
have some greys. I just can't really see them.
Yeah, but your hair's light. It's not dark like mine.
It is. I have to just find them. Yeah. What am I? 37. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, you're just coming to the midlife unraveling.
I'm coming to you. Bring me over.
What is from the astrological perspective, what are the constellations relationship to birth time? What are the constellations you are looking for as the marker points?
So good question, but I'm going to reframe the question for
Please
you
do, yes.
because Western astrology, which is the one I study, doesn't technically use constellations. It uses the 30-degree segments, 12 of them around. Can't remember the word, but just kind of above the horizon, and they don't necessarily correlate to the actual constellations that they're named after.
Right. Okay.
Because
Interesting.
there's the people go, oh, but there's actually 13 signs and everything's moved, and yeah, that's so for Western astrology, it's
Makes so much more
that
sense.
that the scientists who are the astrologers and the medical professionals, that were their observation from where the planets were at the time of birth in those particular areas related to different themes. So the transits, so the zodiacal signs relate. So, for example, they're quite generational. Pluto is the first one that comes up. So between the ages of 35 to 39-ish for our generation, Pluto will come to 90 degrees from where you were born. And Pluto's it goes back and forth. Every year it kind of like appears to go backwards and then forwards. So it can take, 3 or 4 years to move over that point that's 90 degrees to where it was when you were born. So generationally, John, I'd say you and I, Pluto was in Libra. Nicole, it might still be in Libra. I don't know. I'd have to look up your chart. So Pluto in Libra at a certain degree point means that Pluto's just finishing up in Capricorn. So that's Pluto, Libra to Capricorn is a 90 degree. It's called a square. So we call it Pluto square. So that can be quite big for some people. It was for me. Different generations, like my mother's generation, their Pluto square was a little bit later. It kind of all went in with Uranus opposition, which is another of the big ones, where Uranus comes to 180 degrees. So Uranus is currently in Taurus. It was in Scorpio, the opposite sign, when I was born. That's meant to be the big shake-up. So when I was interviewing Karen Hunter, her generation had Pluto and Uranus quite close together when she was born, so it was kind of like a double whammy for them. Whereas for those going through it at the moment, it goes first Pluto, then Neptune square, which is Neptune 90 degrees to where it was. And so I'm coming towards the end of that. That can be kind of like a spiritual fog, which hopefully by now towards the end will be lifting.
Yeah.
And then it'll be Uranus for me, the Uranus opposition, and then there's a Saturn opposition, which doesn't tend to be too much of a big thing because you've just been through all these real powerhouse ones. So the midlife crisis, that kind of classic go out and buy a sports car, that's generally around the time of the Uranus opposition. So that could be, it's generally 42. It does kind of depend. I've
Right
been
there.
quite fascinated
42
with
right now.
yeah. But I've been quite fascinated with Uranus tends to go like really fast, and then it'll slow down, and it'll appear to go backwards, and it'll go backwards really fast. So I've got a friend 3 months younger than me who she has her Uranus opposition a year before me. I've got friends 5 years older. They've got the Uranus opposition 2 years before me. It's just, I find it quite fascinating just how the planets move. And yeah, there's me getting my astrology geek out again.
Love it.
So good.
Yeah.
We should have started this earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also found it quite interesting. Like I've got a friend who's an incredible singer, Muriel, and I looked at her chart and just looking at different charts of the interplay between your birth of like the Sun and Neptune and having a harmonious aspect there can really be musicians kind of have that.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, there's just really some quite fascinating, but it might not necessarily be the Sun Neptune. Astrology is very much not an exact science.
Yeah. So do you, like, if
But it
somebody who was
can
listening
be.
wanted to have you to look at their chart, do you do that?
I would say that I'm at the stage where if I have someone's chart, I can probably look at it and just tell them some stuff for 5 minutes, but I don't think at this stage I could sit down and do an hour with someone because it would probably take me 4 hours to prepare because I did actually start to do that as an example for a friend to see how long it would take and what I would have to do. So at this stage, I'm not really doing that. I can recommend people though. There are some great people who've been working on it for a lot longer than me. It's one of those you need to study it for quite some time.
Yeah.
But I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It seems like learning a language so that you can read the symbols and their relationships a lot faster. We've had some done before
Yes.
where the guy had
Oh,
all
well,
this
who's
stuff.
David Hoyne?
Yeah, all this stuff printed out, and we were looking at it and like, how can you do that? Yeah, all the symbols
Yeah.
make sense
I
eventually.
guess it's a bit
obviously.
like because I learnt Japanese and studied it at university and have lived there a couple of times, and it's easy enough to learn the alphabet, and that's only like the two basic alphabets, like not when you get into the Chinese characters as well. But then actually making sense of it all is,
Yeah, especially at any kind of pace.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I remember when my dad was studying Korean, he was really into languages. Um, he was teaching me as well. As we sat there, I think I was at high school and he was about to go off to Korea, and he was showing me these flashcards of the Korean script, which is so much easier than the Japanese script because it
Oh
was
wow.
all based on shapes of tongue and teeth, and
Oh, wow.
"sa" was always like if it was a "sa" or a "se," there would always be this would be the same character or part of the entirety of it, and Japanese was certainly not like that.
No.
John learned Japanese
Yeah,
as
I
well.
studied. I
Yeah.
studied at high school. I didn't
Yeah, it was
really
the
take
thing
much
when we were
further.
at high school, right?
Yeah.
You learnt
Um,
Japanese. Yeah.
yeah, my son is doing it right now. He's
They
14.
still
He's quite
teach it.
excited about it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, he was just offered to go to Japan for 3 years. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
3 years. Yeah, not something we're accepting. But,
Yeah. Imagine
Yeah.
that.
It
at
has its
14.
own challenges, especially for women. I mean,
Mm.
I assume it's changed a little bit in the 20 years since I've lived there, but
Mm.
yeah,
You would
yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Thank you so much. We've really been all over the place.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. Awesome to hear parts of your story and the things that you're excited about and your journey. I remember you doing Kirtan at Kawapurapura on the stage in the group, and it was very beautiful.
I hope I wasn't on a pedestal.
No, Sarah, just an equal stage where I was equally on the grass, not beneath, just, alongside.
And it was a sunny day. It wasn't that one where it was like raining and we're trying to run the instruments out.
Oh my gosh, no, I had nice weather, yeah. Oh,
Yeah. I did so many of those KP festivals that they all do really kind of start to blur into one another.
No doubt.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Those were the
Right.
days.
those were the days.
And we
Well,
Who
we
took
do
knows
like-
what future days will bring?
Yes, we do like to close with your opportunity to kind of share final words plus anything you want to plug right now. And yeah, so the floor,
Go on, stand in your
the floor
power.
is yours.
stand in my power.
Maybe do your hair, get the hair mascara
Oh,
in
yes.
there.
Get my hair mascara out. I don't think I used it today. Zoom's quite good like that, Just be yourself, everyone. Come to that place of acceptance, however hard that is and however much of a roller coaster it is. You'll always come back, and it'll be okay. And if you want to listen to any musings with various people, please feel free to tune in to Unraveling Midlife. I do share a bit of music. I'm challenging myself to share original music. And sometimes I go, I don't know what I'm going to play. I'm still trying to learn how to record effectively myself. So sometimes it's a challenge for me to just release something even though it's not perfect, because otherwise I would never do anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so tune on into Unraveling Midlife. I'm hoping I will get on YouTube soon. It's on the podcast apps and on my website www.sarahmarlowespence.com, and I will make sure you know how to spell that.
Yes.
The
Yeah,
other
we'll put all
thing,
of that info in the show notes.
yeah,
You
the
mentioned
other
that
the
last
other thing that I mentioned that you might not have had a pen to write down was the Dalian method, which is DALIAN.
Cool,
The
yeah, you
Dalian
made that
method.
It sounded amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a couple of very late festivals in the autumn here in Aotearoa. I'll be making an appearance in some form or another at those, which may or may not have already been by the time you're listening. And yeah, keep unraveling your life. Just don't be too hard on yourself.
Right?
That's for those people. That's really for myself.
For us all, Sarah.
Yes,
For us all.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's life. I often kind of joke around and go, "Oh, better luck next life."
Yeah.
But I think we're talking about, having that awareness. And I'm like, actually, I don't think next life's going to be less of a roller coaster necessarily. So better luck in between lives. Or like on last Friday, and Jupiter and Neptune had just kind of been, Jupiter had just kind of gone over Neptune, and everyone's been talking about it for months in the astrology world, that it's going to be big faith or like deep meditation. And I actually had the most amazing meditations, and I thought, oh my God, how does it get better than this? What would it be like to have this every day? And then the next day I'm like, I can still feel the plug-in. The next day I'm like, oh, an emotion came on. Can I still feel the plug-in to the universe?
Yeah. Just take me back.
Yeah.
No attachment though, eh? You know?
No, of course not.
Crazy.
Thanks, guys.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It
Yes,
was so
thank you.
awesome to have you on. And yeah, we are eternally grateful. And hopefully talk again at some stage.
Yes, I'm sure we will.
Awesome.
Given we talked so much about Kirtan in that interview, it would make sense to share some in the music part of the show, which I forgot to tell you about in the intro. So hopefully you stuck around this long and you get the secret song to listen to. I decided against Kirtan because I have shared a few recordings of Kirtan, and trying to get good recordings that are of the quality that I'm happy to share, and I'm getting better at just sharing, but trying to get some Kirtan that has a range of instruments, etc. I thought, well, and I don't want to, I've already shared some in previous episodes where it's been like a recorded, like officially, produced kind of track. So I decided to stick with mantra, since we talked a lot about Kirtan, which is singing mantra, and share what I recorded in a very special place. It's called Tara Sanctuary at the stunning Mana Retreat on the Coromandel Peninsula in Aotearoa. And the Tara Sanctuary is a building designed using the Fibonacci series, and amongst other building techniques, there's a booklet that they have down there that outlines it all, that I was having a read of. And it has the most incredible acoustics. So because it's Tara Sanctuary, here's a Tara mantra where the melody wasn't prepared, it just came. Enjoy. Om Tara Tutare Ture Soha. 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 Om Tare 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 Tutare Ture Soha. Unraveling Midlife is brought to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand by www.sarahmarlowespence.com. Theme music is by Sarah Marlowe Spence and Saraswati Marie Willis, and art by Samantha Hepburn.